Hi everyone, and welcome to our second flipped video lecture. This lecture is designed to correspond with the handout that you have that follows the spice category, so please have that handy. If you have lost this handout, please make sure you download another one on Edmodo before you begin. So here we are with the Aztec Empire. We just wrapped up our studies of the Maya down here in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. The Aztecs did exist for a period of time that overlapped with the Maya, but they were relatively independent of one another. The Aztec civilization began in the city of Tenochtitlan, which we discussed was as a result of a religious sign, which was an eagle eating a snake on a cactus. And the Aztecs began their civilization that is now actually modern-day Mexico City. So let's start talking about the Aztecs in terms of their social systems. Very much like the Maya, we have very clear gender roles in this society. The men worked outside of the home. They worked on the farming and harvesting of the crops. And specifically, another class that was very important in Aztec society that was comprised exclusively of men were the warriors. Warriors were highly, highly valued in Aztec civilization as a result of their reliance upon war for human sacrifice, which we'll loop back to in just a minute. For women were again largely responsible for domestic tasks. Some of you may recall from the gallery walk that you saw a picture of a woman weaving, and that's an important role that women played in Aztec society because the textiles or the clothing was used as not only a valuable object for trade, but at the marketplace, sometimes the cotton and the textiles that were made from that cotton were used as currency. Social classes, we've got two terms. The pipiltin, were the nobility, and that social class were obviously the highest ranking society. One of the things that really marked this noble group was the clothing that they wore. So I just mentioned that clothing was an important part of women's tasks, the creation of clothing, and often the recipients of that clothing were the noble class. I mentioned this with the Maya as well, but the nobles were the ones who were able to drink chocolate, so hot chocolate made from those cacao beans was a sign of noble strength and noble status. And physically, those noble people were found in the middle of the town. There were really some social segregation there, that the poor lived elsewhere. And the WHI.Flipped were the commoners. That was the second social class group. So this included merchants, who were the businessmen, artisans, the skilled craftsmen, and landless serfs or slaves. So it's important to see that we've got a large difference between the powerful in the society and the low end of the society, the least powerful end of the society. Politically, the Aztecs, I'm sorry, there's a little bit cut off here. The Aztecs were led by a single emperor. So please note that there's a difference here in the way in which the Aztec society was politically organized versus the Maya's independent city-states. So they have a single emperor. So that emperor had working for him advisors, warriors, officials, all kinds of local administrators, which helped create unity because the leader couldn't be in all places at once. So he had a large team of people that would help enforce his rule all over the empire. Similarly, the emperor had every person pay tribute and those taxes, and that tax system actually helped create not only economic stability in the empire, but political unity, because if everyone's paying the king, it reinforces who in fact is in power. Some of the tributes that would be offered to the king. One of them were jaguar skins. Jaguars were seen as a very spiritually significant animal in Aztec society. Feathers, you can somewhat see this here in the headdress of the man that is supposed to be the king. The bird feathers were in a headdress, were a sign of nobility and sign of a kingship. So the emperor was the only one who was allowed to wear that. Continuing on politically, the king was also supported by an extensive military of warrior priests. So again, we see a tremendous correlation between military power and religious beliefs with the Aztecs. The Aztecs had a system whereby the warriors would go out and conquer places for the specific purpose of gaining captives that would then be a sacrifice to their gods. So the warriors, you can see based upon their attire here, the warriors were more than just fighters. They were also religiously significant people within the society. Something that's sort of a unique component of the Aztec politics is the emperor had to actually be accountable to his nobility. So the nobility were essentially checking the power of the king. And if the king didn't meet the responsibilities as it was determined by the nobility, he actually, in fact, could be killed. So there's a unique sign here, early signs of a more balanced form of government, despite the fact that the Aztecs still believed that their king was a god. And so there's a little bit of a contradiction there, that he has the religious significance, but he also had responsibility to his people. I wanted to touch base on one specific political leader, a man named Montezuma. There's also a different pronunciation that's Moctezuma, same man. He was the leader of the Aztec Empire when they were conquered by the Spanish. This is just a drawing intended to be him. You'll note again the presence of the feathers indicating that he was the king. There's sort of a tragic story related to his leadership, which is that he misinterpreted the conquering Spanish for a god. The details of that prophecy we're going to get into in a little bit. But he believed that the conquering Spanish were actually the sign of a returning god, and welcomed in the people who ultimately conquered his civilization. So he has a sort of a tragic legacy as a leader in the Aztec Empire. So please go ahead and press pause on the video right now, and on your handout, please answer the following check for understanding question. Compare and contrast the politics of the Aztecs and the Maya. When you're ready, press play, and we'll move on to the interactions with the environment. So between the humans and the environment, just like the Maya, we have we have an agricultural society. This is a society comprised largely of farmers who would grow maize or corn, beans, squash, chilies. Commonality here with the Maya, which is not surprising, they're in the same climate region. We mentioned this already when we talked about the beginnings of the Aztecs and the problems that they would encounter. But one of the most creative, and using that word from we talked about last class, the ingenuity of the Aztecs, the cleverness, they were able to create what are known as chinampas, or floating gardens. And those floating gardens were sticks that were bound together, and then upon which there'd be leaves and other things piled on, so that you'd have floating land that can then be used to grow. But that wasn't the only thing that they needed. They also needed to connect themselves physically from the middle of the lake all the way out to the edge here. So they created these early causeways or bridges to connect their city of Tenochtitlan to the dry land. Another thing is they relied heavily upon the maguey plant. So the maguey plant they were able to effectively use for clothing. They used it for food purposes. It was able to be part of, they used it for fire, for fuel for their fires. And they even were using it to convert it into alcohol. So many different adaptations of the plant for various uses in their life. Please pause again. There is a video that I have put into the blend space. It's number 2, so you can pause this and open up box 2, or you can just cut and paste the link I've put right here. Please go ahead and do so, and then answer the question. How do the chinampas prove the advancement of the Aztecs? How do these floating gardens prove that this was an advanced society? So go ahead and press pause, open up that video, and when you're ready, here comes culture. So culture, you're going to see a lot of commonalities here with the Maya, a lot of similarities with these two empires. The Aztecs were heavily influenced by the Maya from a religious perspective. They were polytheistic, meaning they believed in many gods. There was over 1,600 known nature gods in the Aztec society. They also adopted the Maya 365-day farming calendar and 260-day religious calendar. Obvious evidence that the two groups interacted with one another. They also would write on codex, again, that stone or bark upon which the glyphs would be written. But most of those codex were lost after the Spanish conquered. The Spanish were trying to rid these quote-unquote savage people of their ways, and so many of those are lost. But the remaining ones we've used to help us understand the Aztecs. Apologize, it's a little bit repetitious that they had the same calendar as the Maya. In fact, a lot of the depictions of the calendar that you see, many people credit it to the Maya, but it was actually the Aztecs who took the concept of the calendar and actually put it into a circular form, which we'll look at in a minute. The Aztecs also had a mathematical system of counting, and that was a result of having to count tribute, make sure they knew who was paying taxes and how much. And the Aztec counting system actually had a base 20. We have a base 10, 20, 30, 40. That's sort of the basis of our number system. The Aztecs had a base 20 number system, but just like the Maya, they were influenced to have that concept of zero, another advanced topic for the time. An important god. You see sort of a graphic image here of the actions the Aztecs would take to pay homage, to pay respect to their gods. And that specifically was god Huitzilopochtli. Tough word. Huitzilopochtli, who was their god of war, and they believed that the god of war, and actually really became the god of the people, so sort of the sign of their entire civilization. They believed that to appease that god, they must give him human hearts and blood. So the Maya too practiced human sacrifice, but nowhere near the scale that the Aztecs practiced human sacrifice. Which, I mean, like I mentioned before, they had wars specifically for the purpose of capturing these prisoners. But it was an extremely common practice in Aztec society to see usually lower class people being sacrificed to the god Huitzilopochtli. Another god that you saw on your gallery walk, the Laylock god, silent T there, is the god of rain. They had, and this is another one that's important to know, Quetzalcoatl, or Quetzalcoatl is another way that some of the historians pronounce or translate that word. This was the belief of in the god that was a feathered serpent being snake, so a feathered snake. And then the depiction, this is somewhat of a depiction of Quetzalcoatl, one interpretation of what they believed what modern day people believed that the Aztecs thought he looked like. This is a god associated with knowledge, wisdom, and resurrection coming back. That's the key phrase there, because it is Quetzalcoatl for whom Montezuma mistook the Spanish. In other words, Montezuma believed that this god here, Quetzalcoatl, was coming back, and that when the Spanish arrived, it was Quetzalcoatl that Montezuma believed he was seeing. So an unfortunate case of misidentity there. The Aztec homes were shrines, and the Aztecs' homes had shrines in them, little areas for prayer and worship. And the pyramids that the Aztecs built were used as temples, just exactly like the Maya. Very similar architecture, very similar purpose. They too played the ball game. They played it believing that it kept the sun and moon in cycle, and that they needed to do so to appease the gods. And in a more worldly purpose, the game itself was also used by the Aztecs as conditioning for their warriors, since those warriors played such an important part in their society. Lastly, economics. The Aztecs were very, very economically dependent upon trading. As I wrote here, was one of the main purposes of war was to defend their economic trading or to gain access to different areas with whom they could trade. There's actually an interesting component to that trading, though, which is the poteca. The poteca, where these are not necessarily potecas specifically, but depicting Aztec traders. The poteca were traders who also served as spies for the king. So he had these traders, these businessmen, out and about working for his benefit because he uses them basically as his eyes all throughout the empire. So we see a sign of a strong political leader here who's using even traders as spies and ways to make sure that people are following his command. Mentioned this already, but the tribute to the kings unified the empire economically. Don't need to recopy this again. We can see some of the major crops and the tasks of the farmers. And lastly, Tenochtitlan, apologize again to get cut off here. Tenochtitlan was also a major, that's that word, marketplace. That was, in fact, when the Spanish came to conquer the Aztecs, they were absolutely floored to see the intricacies and the details and just the size of the market that was present in Tenochtitlan, again, the capital city. So the Aztecs are an impressive group of people who had some of their own challenges within the empire, who ultimately fell to the conquistadors led by Hernan Cortez. Go ahead and pause this here. If you're interested, I've posted a couple other links that are provide additional information about the Aztecs. Please make sure you bring this handout with you to class tomorrow, because this is your homework grade for me. Thanks.